future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Yes, it is another Friday. It's been a while, but here we are. It is Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. And each week, we try to bring it each week. Each week, we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can support this show, become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. You can help out the show right now by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. Yes, indeed. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on. Leave a comment to let other folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. Well, on today's show, we'll get into some things. You know, imagine that. It's another nail-biting vote to prevent a government shutdown before tonight's midnight deadline. Yes, this is the dramatic sitcom version of politics that the Republicans want to keep renewing, despite horrible ratings and the fact that it actually hurts you when it happens. Lots of not-so-good news on the climate front. Yep. Republicans are waging a war on electric vehicles. And, oh, look at that. Look who's going to vote with the Republicans on that one. Good old John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. What's going on there, Mr. Fetterman? Looking to be the next Joe Manchin, apparently? Maybe. That might be what's at stake here. Especially given his support of what's going on with Israel. Big oil and gas industry lobbyists successfully gutted new building codes that called for making new construction electric ready. Yep, there's that. Oh yeah, and 16 states are suing the Biden administration over their move to halt new exports of liquefied natural gas in order to study the effects on climate, national security, and the economy. Oh, is that? Oh yeah, record-setting heat hits Rio de Janeiro. Heat index of 143 degrees. Real temperature of 107, 108, I believe. That's deadly, by the way. And scientists can't account for the continued record-setting ocean temperatures. They say all the models didn't tell us that this was going to happen. Yep. Oh, and so much more. And the United States falls out of the top 20 happiest countries in the world for the first time since the annual World Happiness Report began in 2012. It was initially initiated by the United Nations for a whole bunch of sets of measures. Now it's done by some independent polling groups, some folks over there in Oxford. And the U.S. fell to number 23. Doesn't look much good. And guess who's leading the charge on the unhappiness ticket? Yes, it is young folks. Younger generations seem to be the most unhappy, and I wonder why. We'll get into it. Several new strike votes in higher education, like McGill University, they're one of them. Boston University, they're another one of them. Looking to go ahead and go on a strike a little bit. Oh, and did you see all the stuff about Mackenzie Scott this week? Yeah, Mackenzie Scott, former spouse of Jeff Bezos. Yeah, she continues to kind of spend those kind of billions of dollars on charity. And Elon Musk is not very happy about it, says that she's contributing to the downfall of America. She gave nearly $500 million to nonprofits this past year. Because apparently the only way that we can have any semblance of a society is if we got kind of billionaires who are going to grace us with their leftover millions. Anyways, really mixed on that one. And the Washington Post runs the bio of a new Palisades School District school board member, Linda Wenhold. Pretty impressive, right? Washington Post. How does a local school board member get a full profile in the Washington Post? Well, apparently it does. All it takes, right? Just you can take notes for this one. Just in case you want to know. I guess it helps if you take and teach classes with the Christian and Nationalist Patriot Academy. If you advocate for your school district to teach that America's true history is a Christian nation, and if you make attempts to, you look at any attempts to make your schools more welcoming and accessible for all kids, well, you make sure that everybody knows that those are actually secret plots by Marxists and secular leftists to destroy America. Yeah, Palisades just had a school board meeting the other night. Yep, and after this came out, and from my understanding is one kind of brave citizen, as it were, stepped forward and kind of drew attention to this, but there were crickets from the rest of the crowd. I'm not sure what's going on here. We're definitely got to add Palisades to the watch list, right-wing takeover watch list that we see also with Souderton. It's going to be pretty crazy. Well, the Bucks County Beacon announces its first annual Beacon Fest to support the work of the Beacon. Yes, let's go. Let's support the work of the Beacons. Bring all the troublemakers together. It's going to be a blast. There's going to be music. There's going to be like booths from different organizations. Maybe I'll even be lucky enough to get a booth there. And I'll be present there too as well. So. The event will be on June 1st, and it'll be at Snipes Farm in Morrisville, PA. I'll give you some more details on that. And if there's any kind of, like D&D fans out there, I'm just going to give a little plug. If you're in the Percy area, we got a new Percy Dungeons and Dragons and community site. I've got it up on Facebook, so we got a group there, and we're going to start getting some progressive tabletop role-playing games going. Ideally, we're going to do some stuff with kids. We're going to do some stuff with adults, kind of mix and match, parents and kids together, should be a lot of fun. If you're interested in that, just kind of check out the group page of Percy Dungeons and Dragons and Community. And we're going to start planning some games soon. So hopefully we're going to start rolling this out. I'm really looking forward to it, having another space of kind of community gathering and community building. Oh boy, it's one of these days, everybody. So look, you want some more PA progressive talk, or just progressive talk in general, labor talk in particular, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern, his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get his stuff. Subscribe to his podcast, wherever you get your podcast, and go to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast, the amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. Yes, make sure to follow them on X at the Night Caucus. That's at the Night Caucus on Twitter or X. And subscribe to their podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't heard, like, we just had the 1 year anniversary, folks. Come on, if you haven't heard, I don't know where you're at. The Signal is a new podcast, second season, actually. It's not new anymore, but, relatively new. Signal is a podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, the Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents, streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions who can steer the community toward calmer, progressive roots. Head on over to buckscountybeacon.podbean.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And also check out the Civic Circle podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. That is tackling politics and policy from a Gen Z lens. Once a month, they chat about activism, advocacy, and all the political happenings affecting your generation today. Check that out at civiccircle.podbean.com or wherever you get your podcast. For all you gamers out there, the Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show. They got everything from retro N64s, latest consoles, video games for all platforms, action figures. Ooh, that's weird. My music just cut out for some reason. Sorry about that. Action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops, and good grades and report cards get your kids discounts too. Got a question about a game? Look for something hard to get? They've got you covered. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at the Game In. That's at the Game In with 2 N's. Shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. You find yourself in the Kutztown area, you've got to check out the Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse. That is located at 466 West Main Street, kitty corner from the Kutztown University campus. The Heart and Hearth is an American bistro featuring barbecue and French-inspired fare, all with locally sourced and organic ingredients. Shout out to Colleen and Jim who run the place, and they're just awesome people and an amazing place. And a shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's @SongADayMan on Twitter. And look, if we want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress today. We're here for the fight, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement and the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. And I cannot tell you how thankful I am for our continued members and our patrons as we get heading into this tax season. Just had to kind of put the taxes together and like reminded once again that, you know, this show, the work that we're able to do, the interviews that we're able to bring to you for our Out the Coop live show, it's just not possible without the support of our members. You know, this has been kind of, you know, very much a, you know, I guess they call it like a passion project on my part. You know, this is not my normal job. I don't get paid for doing this. I do help support the show significantly, but it's without our members and patrons, this is just not going to be possible. So I really want to kind of thank you so much once again for all your support of kind of what we do. And look, we want to keep this going. We want to keep on building. We want to do new things. That support is going to be absolutely more critical as we head into this really what promises to be a chaotic and potentially difficult election year. So we shall see. So yeah, as you can see, my music cut out today about halfway through. I thought I got that all fixed before the show, so I'm sorry it was kind of running a little bit late this morning. But you know, I'm away from the console for a week. I was on vacation with my family. Came back to a really chaotic work week. I'm not even going to go into that because if I go into that, all you're going to hear me is complaining about my job. Suffice it to say, I had to talk myself down this week from, I literally, the words were in my head and I stood up in my office and I said, okay, I just got to talk myself down for this one. But the words that I had in my head that I was like, my body was ready to go do was to go to my department chair and say, look, this is at the beginning of the week. I'm not going to be here for the rest of this week. Right. And I'm going to use that time to think about if I'm ever coming back. Right. I mean, that's the kind of space I was in this week. So it's good to be back in this chair. So I'm also sorry that, you know, I wasn't able to get to the show on Monday. I was hoping that I was going to have the first Out the Coop live, and that was going to be the kind of welcome back show. But in part because of that aforementioned bad week I had at work, I had a nasty little migraine that came in on Monday afternoon that I couldn't sit in front of a screen anymore. So I had to go. So anyways, here we are. Welcome. It's good to see everybody this morning, and glad you could join us for this day. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going on, and, you know, there's some stuff that I'm having, I'll admit it, like I'm having a difficult time paying attention or following with any kind of earnestness the you know, the House votes about whether or not they're going to fund the government or not. And why? And look, you know, I go back and forth on this because I don't want to belittle this stuff, right? I don't want to suggest that it's unimportant or anything like that because it's not, right? The government doesn't get funded. That means kids go without food. Government doesn't get funded. That means kind of, you know, military personnel that are deployed kind of stop getting their paychecks. Government doesn't get funded, and a whole lot of things that we depend on kind of our daily basis shut down. Right? National parks shut down. Right? Access to records, passport office shut down. Right? I mean, lots of things happen when our quote unquote elected representatives decide that they're not going to pay for stuff that they already committed to. Right now, there's a bill that's out there. It's a $1.2 trillion spending package to avert partial government shutdown. But that's, you know, that's how you see it framed in the media, right? As a spending package, stuff like that. But let's be clear. Most of what is kind of in here is they're paying for things that we've already done, that they have already put into place. Right? And, you know, this is like the worst sitcom you could ever possibly imagine. You know, it's led by a bunch of really kind of like mediocre and kind of frankly boring individuals who have way too much power. Like these are the folks that would have, say for example, they're kind of, on trust fund babies who kind of, kind of like are kind of sucking at the teeth of their parents' kind of millions, who gets themselves in a position of power, and they decide that they are going to personally like fork up the money along with a bunch of other wealthy donors who also kind of want to curry their favor to run their own kind of sitcom. And then the networks kind of feel obliged to run it, even though it's horrible content, right? That's what this is about. I mean, I shouldn't say that's what this is about. This is the sense of it. This is why it's difficult for me to kind of spend time following it, because they just keep on doing this again and again and again, and they're stuck in this cycle, right? And let's be, and I know 100% that really what the agenda here is just to kind of like make the government not work, right? Is to further our kind of like, descent into kind of corporate rule or oligarchy. Right? There's no other way to do this. That's what neoliberalism is about, right? It's about kind of like making the government as small as possible and handing over the power to corporations to rule us, right? Where we no longer have representation over the kind of like the terms of our own lives. That's all we're talking about. Right. I mean, even like the abstract arguments, people, well, free trade is better, the way of doing this, and the market will rule. Look, that argument doesn't even like hold any water anymore. Not that it ever did, right? But in terms of just like empirical data about what goes on, no, it's not about. It's like, who is going to rule us, and will we have any say in the terms under which we live, or the rules under which we live, or the policies under which we live, the world? Do we have any say in our future? Or do we hand it all over to private corporate interests and hope for that to get some of the crumbs as they fall to the ground? I mean, that's it. And, the ongoing strategy, and part of the reason this is so frustrating to me is because the ongoing strategy of primarily the Republican Party, but also kind of centrist Democrats, right? The neoliberal kind of like agenda has been basically to slowly make the functions of government more difficult, right? Make the workings of our democracy, quote unquote, a representative democracy, right? Workings of whatever democracy we have, whatever version of a democracy we have, to make those things more of a joke to the vast majority of people, so they check out, throw their hands up, get cynical, don't participate, right? And get angry at the government. And then roll out the red carpet to kind of like people like Elon Musk, right? Jeff Bezos, to rule our world. Right? The only thing that is new here, that over the past 50 years of this assault on the public sphere and democracy, right? The particular flavor it is, not that it was ever absent before, but now the people who are leading the charge are kind of like ideologues, not over kind of free market stuff, but Christian nationalist crap. Mike Johnson, the head of the House, is a Christian nationalist. We played sections of an interview of him before where he's basically, got to kind of like God's rule first. We got to bring our government in line with God's rule. That is a Christian nationalist move. Because what he's not meaning, right? Let's just be clear too as well, is like when he's saying that we've got a God's word first, Christian word, the American Christian nation. They're not saying that like love your neighbor, right? They're not kind of like promoting policies that, that look out for the least among us. They're not kind of advocating for being our brother's keeper. They're not advocating for making sure that, the hungry are fed, the sad are comforted, the homeless have places to stay. No, they're doing exactly the opposite of all that stuff. This is like the, Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages version of Christianity. The idea where the rule of the church shall be the rule of all or else. Either you get on board and convert to the Christian way of being things, or you get cut by the wayside. And even their version of Christianity is a bastardization of Christianity. It is a justification for a new divine right of kings. Self-appointed kings like Mike Johnson. Corrupt kings like Donald Trump. Look at the Republican leadership anointing themselves every day under the banner of Christian nationalism, claiming to care while they kind of inflict pain upon the least among us. I mean, come on. But that doesn't make all this stuff that much less real, right? It doesn't make it that less real or concerning or dangerous. In fact, it makes it more dangerous. What we're seeing right now in this partial government shutdown, we'll see. They're supposed to be taking a vote soon. I don't know where they are. Let me just kind of refresh my page here. They're doing all, everyone's live updates. Oh my God, 16 minutes ago, a new update. Let's see. It said Friday morning. They said they're going to do it. I mean, we'll see if this goes through. I mean, I was reading this morning in the Washington Post and New York Times, and they said, like, well, normally the way that Mike Johnson has been able to kind of pass these packages is basically with all or the vast majority of Democrats and a kind of a significant chunk of the Republican Party, the Republican representatives, right? But because the rules that they're operating under, they require a 2/3 majority. Again, self-inflicted wounds here. They decided on this for themselves. They could change that in a second. But they require a 2/3 majority, and it's unclear if he can, if Johnson even can even get to half of the Republican caucus about whether to get the votes. Doesn't get there, doesn't get to that half, this is not going to pass. So all this is very real. All this is going to inflict pain upon the least among us. You Christian nationalists, you. The rich will not get hurt with a government shutdown. They'll celebrate it because then EPA enforcement goes away, the dumping stuff goes away, all the regulation stuff goes away. Even if just for a little time, they just love that. They'll have to bathe in that every once in a while. But everyone else has to pay the price for these people's Christian nationalist games. It's incredible. It's incredible. So we'll see. I mean, we'll keep on watching. The thing that struck me, the thing that, you heard me list at the beginning of the show today, just some of the stuff that just been happening on the climate. I mean, there's just a ton of news around the climate crisis and attempts to do stuff about it right now that, again, is not front and center. I made myself this week, I shouldn't have done this, but I did. I made myself listen. I didn't watch. I listened to the podcast version. I watched listened to Chris Hayes' show, right, on MSNBC. I listened to a couple other kind of clippets of MSNBC, and I literally can't get through the programs right now. Like, I mean, I forced myself, I'm sitting there kind of brushing my teeth, get ready. I said, okay, are we ready for bed? I'm just going to kind of as I'm, cleaning up and, doing some dishes and then shutting down my computer and brushing my teeth. I'm just going to listen to this as it goes on because I feel the need to at least have some sort of kind of sense of where some of the mainstream media is doing it, and in particular how some of the the Democratic people are doing things. So so I listen, and I'm like halfway through the program, and all they've done is give opinions about how bad Donald Trump is as a person and what's happening in these court cases and things like this. And I'm like, that doesn't even correspond, right? The kind of news that is on cable news is so far removed from the amount the seriousness of things that are going on is remarkable, right? I mean, I'm reading stuff in the New York Times, reading stuff in the Washington Post, and there's all these climate reports coming out, right? The climate reports coming out, there's attempts at legislation, there's attacks upon attempts to move us forward in the climate, to respond to the climate crisis. All that stuff's going on, no mention of it whatsoever. And frankly, to Chris Hayes's, I'll give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe in the last 10 minutes of his show, talked about some of this stuff. I don't know. But I couldn't listen to another person come on and say the same things about Donald Trump and kind of what he thinks and all this, and make, kind of just opine, right? It's like basically it's like hot takes on what you think is going to be the outcome of Donald Trump's trials. Will he be able to pony up the $500 million, right, in order to secure? I mean, will they start to impound his properties? I mean, that is a story, and that is an important story. I'm not saying that's not, but come on. It's every single day is like that. So I'm looking at things like this, right? I'm looking at this, this is from the New York Times, right? So, as part of the Biden's attempts to do some things around climate, right? I mean, again, the Inflation Adjustment Act, whatever the hell they're going to call it, whatever, it was the most significant climate legislation ever passed in the history of the United States. That, however, is not saying a whole lot because we have not passed anything, or virtually nothing, up until now. But nonetheless, they got that through. Biden's initial plan, right, when he kind of came into this climate agenda, was really good. Right? It was the kind of thing, and if you remember, if you listen to the show back when Biden's climate stuff was first coming out, the Build Back Better bill and stuff like that, that thing surprised the crap out of me and a whole lot of people who have been critical of Biden throughout his career, right? As being, the centrist, moderate one, whatever, like trades on his likability, but then does really kind of, put your finger in the air and make sure that he's like in the center of the party, whatever it might be. Right. And, pretty bad on kind of Israel and Palestine, obviously, as we kind of see that now, we are all now effectively helping fund the genocide of Palestinian people. And as we saw kind of Jared Kushner this week come out and say, like, actually, it's a genocide of the Palestinian people, the forcing them off their land, becoming kind of forced refugees, so that you can develop the West Bank, or you can develop the Gaza coast and make it a kind of more profitable and kind of nice place for investment, right? It's and we're paying for it, right? So on the one hand, we see, Biden or Blinken come out, even Chuck Schumer come out and kind of criticize Netanyahu and stuff. At the same time, we're just funneling weapons and money to the Israeli government. Words are important, right? But if you want the words to mean anything, you got to stop the flow of the weapons. You got to be out there calling for a ceasefire every single day. As an elected president of the United States who's watching atrocities happen before his eyes, you got to call for a ceasefire. I'm sorry. That's like minimal. Several other people have made this point too, as well, is that, you're gonna set up a temporary, like a temporary dock that's going to allow new supplies to be coming to Gaza for humanitarian aid. Okay, great, right? It's better than kind of like the first airdrops, which actually killed several children. Right? Because the stuff kind of comes down, the airdrop comes down, but there's no distribution network. So now you're going to kind of set up, okay, a temporary dock, and you have people coming. Well, okay, so you bring the ships in to bring in the humanitarian aid. How's it going to be distributed? Oh, you say the UN? No, sorry. Biden administration and Congress, they're cutting off funding to that, to the UN organization that has been there in Gaza. At least for a year. No more funding. Put it on hold. Because the Israeli government propaganda machine came out and said something like, oh, no, the UN, those people, oh, yeah, they're just hiding all the Hamas fighters. And so the Biden administration takes them at kind of face value. Congress takes it at face value. Okay, well, this organization is problematic. We can't send them any money. We can't send them any aid, even though they're the only ones there to have any kind of infrastructure to distribute aid and actually deliver it to the Palestinian people. Right? Anyways. But when Biden was putting his Build Back Better thing through, like, again, all power to the Biden administration at that point. They thought that they could get this through, and if that bill had passed, it would have been a landmark legislation. I mean, that would have really tipped the tide. But of course, as we know, the story goes, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and all the Republican Party voted that down because they didn't want that climate stuff in the bill. They didn't want the government to do good things. Right? Remember, government can only do bad things. Government can only be kind of like in chaos. It needs to be bureaucratic and difficult to deal with, right? To make the government less tasteful so that we hand over our futures to corporate interests. But they came back, worked with Joe Manchin, put together the the Inflation Adjustment Act, and got still some pretty significant climate legislation in that bill. And now this week, right, the Biden administration comes by and they kind of are announcing the most ambitious climate regulation yet. Right? So this is from the New York Times. So just so you get a sense what this legislation is if you haven't seen this already. So the Biden administration on Wednesday issued one of the most significant climate regulations in the nation's history, a rule designed to ensure that the majority of new passenger cars and light trucks sold in the United States are all electric or hybrids by 2032. Nearly 3 years in the making, the new tailpipe pollution limits from the Environmental Protection Agency would transform the American automobile market. A record 1.2 million electric vehicles rolled off dealers' lots last year, but they made up just 7.6% of total U.S. car sales, far from the 56% target under the new regulation. An additional 16% of new cars sold would be hybrids. Cars and other forms, it goes on from there. But that was kind of the whole goal, was to try to get to zero. Remember, right? Zero emissions by 2030. Right? Is it doable to get to zero emissions by 2030? Absolutely. Is it going to happen? I would not put my money on it. So what's been happening, even as this comes out, is that the Republican Party, right, and while really their lobbyists and all the kind of folks around this are working very hard to make sure that that regulation can never take effect. New York Times had a good article on this inside the kind of Republican Party's war on the electric vehicles. And, oh God, the little highlight went away. Sorry, let me go. Oh, I'll just read this one piece of it. I had a bunch of stuff highlighted, and this is why I should print everything out. Anyways, the political war of electric vehicles from the New York Times has been fueled by an incendiary mix of issues: technological change, the future of oil and gas industry, concerns about competition from China, and the American love of motorized muscle. And in the future and the rural reaches of America, where few public charging stations exist, the notion of an all-electric future feels fanciful, another element to the urban-rural divide that underlies the nation's polarization. Mr. Biden's opponent, former President Trump, has for months escalated attacks on electric vehicles broadly, and the new regulation in particular, falsely calling the rule a ban on gasoline-powered cars and claiming electric cars will kill Americans' autos industry. He has called them an assassination of jobs. He has declared that the Biden administration ordered a hit job on Michigan manufacturing by encouraging the sales of electric cars. Within minutes of this week's announcement of the new rules, similar talking points, albeit not as violent, flooded the Republican ecosystem. Quote, the Biden administration is deciding that for Americans which kind of cars they are allowed to buy, rent, or drive, said Senator Shelley Moore, Capito of West Virginia, the ranking Republican on the Senate Environmental Committee, in remarks that were echoed across the Capitol on Fox News. And Fox News headline falsely claimed that the Biden mandates production of electric vehicles. In many ways, Biden's new rules on auto pollution combine elements that conservatives love to hate: government regulations and the notion that Democrats want to force Americans to give up comforts in the name of the environment. That is really right there. That's what I love about that sentence is that it captures what the political strategy is. right? The rhetorical strategy, if you will, right? There's the one thing that, yes, all they want to completely support the fossil fuel industry, but the Republicans are not coming out here and saying we support the fossil fuel industry. There are signs that I see like pump more, support fossil fuels or something like that. I see those signs, right? But the strategy here, where you get kind of, again, because you remember, if you want to kill this kind of regulation, you need pressure from not just the kind of the extremists, you need pressure from across the board. So you need to make people feel that something bad is happening. You need to make them feel like they're victims. Right? This is an old adage, in say political public relations, for example. If you are going to lose the argument, if you know you are making an unpopular argument, what you then do, if you still want, you could basically say, you know what, this is unpopular and I'm wrong, right? And people don't want this. Instead of just say, okay, all right, I'm going to give in on this one. If you are committed to that course of action, and you are okay with winning it, by all means possible. You don't care about the truth. You don't care about facts. You don't care about the future generation. No, you just want to win. Well, one of the things that you do is that you start to instill doubt, and you play upon people's fears. Right? It's a great book called Merchants of Doubt that came out kind of, I don't know, about 10 years ago, maybe now. 9 years ago, maybe. That shows exactly this policy. And this is not a new revelation. This is something that has been tracked and discussed for a while. This is a political strategy. This is the same kind of stuff that, corporations use, right? It is a corporate PR strategy, really. So what you do is you basically say, number one, there are these people in Washington, D.C. that are going to try to force you what to do. They're going to tell you what to do, right? And they're going to patronize you, right? That's that whole idea that they say the Democrats, they're going to treat you like children, which ironically, it's whatever. I'm not, it's the other way around, but whatever. But they're going to kind of basically say, we know what's better for you, right? It's the whole snobbish expert thing, right? It's the attack on higher education and expertise. It's the attack on science, on people who know things, who have like competence in an area that are going to kind of like tell us kind of what is going to be useful. Right? It's going to be the people, the nutritionists, right? You remember the attacks on Michelle Obama because she wanted, to provide programs to help kids exercise and eat good food. And then you have the Republican machine come out and basically, oh my God, she wants to tell you what to eat. She wants to say that you can't have junk food. She's going to attack your soda and take it away, right? It's this kind of stuff. It's that there's this kind of pointy-headed, kind of intellectual, nerdy expert or something like that who's going to tell you what to do because they know better than you do, right? So you first say that there's this group that is infantilizing you, and then they're going to use the power of the government to force you to give up things that you care about, the things that you're used to, because of what they want. Like that's how the argument goes, right? So you're going to be forced to give up your gas-guzzling truck, right? Because the Democrats, right, like want to eat granola crunchy food and love their LED light bulbs, right? That they don't like get their hands dirty, so they like clean electricity, right? They use all those things. That's the strategy. The content or the end game of the strategy is to make sure that you're kind of feeding the fossil fuel industry, right? These are just nothing but like the PR moves of the fossil fuel industry, the most powerful corporations that have ever existed on the face of this planet. They have their representatives in Congress who carry out their will. Whether or not they know they're doing it objectively or not, they have so internalized these arguments to the fossil fuel industry that they want to basically deploy, and they use it for everything. It's not just the fossil fuel industry, but anytime that they want to defeat something that's good that could happen for government, this is what they do, right? They say somebody knows better, and they're going to try to kind of say that how you live your life and how you think is wrong, and then they're going to force you to give up things you care about. That's it. And we see, people fall for it again and again and again and again because it has some resonance to it. Look, it's true. This is like, Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything. right, about the climate crisis. This spells it all out, right? That's why I love that book. It says, like, look, we can't sit around here and pretend that, really our life is going to be exactly as it is now. Like, the only difference is the kind of light bulb we're changing. Right? I mean, that was the Democratic Party strategy for a long time. That was the big green strategy for a long time, right? Is to try to not scare anybody, right? To assure everybody that they're going to have all their creature comforts, that they're not going to do anything differently except for this little tiny change, which seems doable. The fact is, we've known for a long time that it's never going to be effective. Essentially that is a market solution to a collective problem, which never, ever does well. The incentive structure is different. So, what Naomi Klein says in there, no, things will have to change. If we are going to save ourselves from a catastrophic kind of climate future, then things have to change. How we live our lives have to change. The mass consumption has to change. But what we could have done, I mean, we can still do. But, now it's a question of mitigating the damage, right? Rather than preventing the damage. Now we have to decide how bad we want things to be able to go, which is a horrible place to be in, but whatever. But it allows us to at least think, once we have that, this is why the Green New Deal, why that resolution was so important. And then just kind of, whatever. That instead of being embraced by the Democratic Party or being embraced by the left to say, this is what we're going to do. Because it provided a vision. And it said things like this, like, look, we know this is going to be disruptive, right? We know, look, it's just second nature that we go to a gas station and we kind of fill up our cars with gas. That can't happen anymore. We have to get to a place where that's going to be different. And so we're going to have to learn new things, right? We're going to have to kind of think about, like charging our car. And yeah, it's true. It takes us maybe 5 minutes to fill up a tank of gas. Right, and it may take a couple hours to kind of get enough charge to go to where you need. Right, maybe some fast chargers an hour, right, to get you past to 3/4 charge or something like that. But that means if I'm going to go on a trip someplace, right, then I have to stop. If it's a long trip, I'm going to have to stop someplace, and I'm going to have to be able to plug that in to recharge. Which means there's going to have to be changes to our infrastructure, not just in terms of making sure there's enough charging stations in places in rural parts of the country, along interstate highways, right, that are going to be accessible and affordable, if not free. Right? So that's all thing. So the government essentially could make all that stuff free. We could say, basically what we're going to do, we're going to have these things along these, say, major kind of interstate stuff like this, is that electric charging is free. Right? And that could be a collective expenditure they're willing to put in to make sure that we all have access to charging. That's a possibility, right? That's not unrealistic. But that takes time to plan. It also means, say, for example, you're going on a long trip. And say, oh man, I need to stop for gas. Need to stop for gas. So you get out, maybe go and you run into a little convenience store, or maybe you kind of, grab a little thing of M&Ms or a drink or something like that, a cup of coffee, and you get back in your car and you go, right? Maybe 15 minutes. Well, maybe the facilities need to look different, right? Maybe facilities are going to have to be like, okay, if I'm going to charge, it's going to take an hour to charge my car. Then I'm going to have places where people can sit and people can go and things for them to do while they're waiting. Maybe that's better kind of outdoor places, right, for sitting on the thing. Maybe that's kind of in those, the little rest stops, on interstate highways and stuff. Maybe that includes kind of larger areas where that are kind of a little more comfortable. And maybe there will have to be better food, right? And then over time, that just becomes naturalized, right? So we start to realize, okay, we start to change our habits. I remember when I was when I was studying in Germany a long time ago now, but. So I was staying with, kind of this one family, and we were kind of going from one place to another. And it was a kind of a longer trip, and it was the same kind of stuff. We needed to stop for gas, right? And okay, that's fine. So we stopped for gas. And as the American, right, I was kind of used to say, oh, you stop for gas, get back in the car and go, right? Well, here, went in and said, oh, we're going to stop, we're going to have lunch, right? So lunch was kind of built into the plan. So we stopped, so we're going to have lunch. And again, I'm thinking fast food lunch, go here, kind of go up to this counter, wait in line, get some kind of crappy thing that's, been freeze dried or whatever it might be, and sit down there and eat it. Okay, feel quote unquote satisfied, get back in the car and go. Nope. Sat down, and it was kind of like a restaurant. It's kind of like a combination of like a cafeteria and a restaurant. And so we sat down at this table, and like we had stuff that we could order. There was like a server who came over and took our orders, and the guy I was traveling with, right, this older guy who's like, the father of the family they're staying with, whatever, orders. I wish I could remember what it is. It was like Schwein something or other. But anyways, it was like this big piece of meat with the bone still in it, right? And he orders that, and he's, oh, you should really try this. It's really good. And I'm like, okay, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking about this, and something go back and forth. So I chose something else. It comes out, and he gets this plate, and it's got this piece of meat and all this gravy and these like fresh vegetables and stuff. It had a lunch, and it was good. And I can't remember what I had, but I'm like, it was good. But I remember just sitting here, I'm like, holy crap, that came out of a place like this. This is like a roadside stop, and you actually had it, and it was enjoyable. We actually talked, right? It didn't feel like an inconvenience. It felt like a different way of looking at travel, right? It wasn't just only about just getting there, right? Or stuffing it and going as fast as you can from one point to, no, it was actually about, we're going to enjoy this experience along the way. So God forbid, we do something like that here, right? I mean, that we actually start thinking about what makes our lives better, right? That makes a future that kind of is worth living, right? And so then the other parts of that, of that agenda, right, is what allows us to plan for is to say, like, okay, look, we know that there's going to be disruptions. So if you're, relying upon fossil fuels, then there is this kind of infrastructure that's built up, right? There are pipelines, there are places of the country, like in coal country, in natural gas country, and things like this, where, industry or jobs that are kind of connected to this stuff in kind of refining areas and all that stuff. Okay. So that is definitely going to be, not going to be there anymore. Right? If you get off fossil fuels, you're going to really minimize, as your kind of major power source, you're going to minimize your need for those things. But if we decide that we kind of actually want to, be a humane people and have a society worth defending, then we want to make sure that people are not just thrown out to the wind, right? So we plan for it. And you say, hey, look, you know what? We're going to need new manufacturing in, say, solar cells or hydrogen cells or whatever it might be, and wind turbines. Hey, we're going to have to make sure that we have a kind of electrical grid that's built out enough to make sure that we have charging stations and accessibility in all areas of this country. Hey, blah, 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 right? All these kind of things that are predictable and knowable. We plan, we say, hey, look, we recognize there's going to be an impact on your job here in, say, West Virginia or in right here in Pennsylvania, because you work in the natural gas industry or you work in the coal industry. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So we're going to make sure that when we're going to, these new solar plants that are coming in, right, they're going to build this stuff, they're going to be located down the road from where you used to work, right? To make sure, and we're going to make sure that those jobs, not only will you have those jobs, but you're going to have good paying union jobs. You're going to have medical coverage, right? And you're going to have a living wage, all that kind of stuff. So not only are we going to make sure that you're not just left out to hang there like some kind of piece of trash, like that's what we usually do in these sacrifice zones around the country. But no, we could say something else. We could say, no, you know what? We're going to make sure that you're not going to pay the price of it. That matter of fact, we're going to help. Your life actually could get better here. Then you work with, say, for example, the unions. You work with the kind of electricians union, right? And you all these electricians, right? And you basically say, look, we have to build out this power grid, right? We need you, union, to ramp up your apprenticeship programs. We need more electricians who are capable of building out this infrastructure and training these new things, right? We will help pay for those apprenticeship programs. And we need to kind of work with you to plan out how we're going to kind of deal with these projects, right? There's ways of doing this. But all of that is dependent upon us being able to kind of, and I say us, I mean people more broadly, being able to trust that government can do things. And that action, government action, to build out infrastructure, to shift over an economy, things like this, can actually make our lives better. Republicans want to defund everything that is public, so it makes everything public work less well, be more burdensome, and more problematic. There's a segment of Democrats, too, as well, who unnecessarily put burdens on the process, too, as well. These are these centrist Democrats, right, who basically want to say, like, we're going to means test everything. Right? So in order to qualify for X, Y, or Z, we need to make sure that we're going to get into your lives. You have to fill out all this paperwork. You have to do this paperwork every 3 months in order to do this. And it makes it feel like you are just under surveillance all the time. Like you've heard me talk about this in relationship to free higher ed or kind of Medicare for all and things like this. Universal programs become highly popular, right, because they don't pit people against each other. Because everybody's in, because you're part of this community, right? It's been saying, like, if I'm making $125,000 a year, my family, and my neighbor is making $126,000 a year, universal programs don't kind of send out and say, oh, look, you're $125,000, so you get it. You're $126,000. No, you do not. Even though we live essentially the same lives, right? You don't do that. And I understand all the practical reasons. Well, we don't have money. Republicans won't agree to it. Blah, 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 blah. I hear all that stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that we can avoid. This electrical vehicle stuff is kind of, it's important. As a matter of fact, when the Build Back Better bill was first coming out, the auto industry was, and again, it sounds like they're changing their tune now, but whatever. But the auto industry was basically telling the Biden administration, okay, look, if you're going to do this, we need a policy that applies to everybody, right? Because what happens then is that if it applies to everybody, if I'm Ford and I know that my competition, like whatever, Chevy, right, or Mercedes or Volvo or Volkswagen or Dodge or, like Jeep for that matter, if I know we are all playing on the same playing field, right, and I'm incentivized for moving forward and producing electric vehicles, then I'm going to do it, right? Because I'm either penalized for producing gas vehicles, or I'm told that I'm no longer going to be able to produce them after. So one way or another. So then the race becomes who does it the best, right? I mean, that's the market solution, right? And this is how government has always operated, right? In a capitalist economy, where they use market mechanism, regulation is a driver of innovation in situations like this. Because what it does, it says that, look, if your incentive structure is currently to produce like gas guzzling SUVs and trucks, right? That's where the incentive structure, that's where your main profits are. Right. And I'm scared if I produce this new electric vehicle, I might not have a profit. I'm not sure. I'm going to do it halfway. I'm not going to go all the way. And then I'm going to realize, oh, look, it's not as much profit as I want to go. So I'm just going to make more trucks. The incentive structure works against the climate solution. So you basically change the incentive structure. That's all. At their core, these things are not hard. Right. I mean, like kind of objectively. Implementation and all the rollouts and all that stuff is difficult. There's no doubt about it. But making a decision about what is the right direction and why, that's not a hard thing. It's about will and it's about power, right? That's why, again, why do you think Republicans, as their support continues to dwindle, right, and nationwide polling and all that, why do you think they increasingly rely upon things like gerrymandering, right, or attacks on the access to the ballot, right, on regulations on voting, right? They want to kind of, if you cannot win the debate, then you try to discourage people from participating, right? If you cannot win the debates, like I was saying up before, you make people feel like somebody's trying to take something away from them. If you cannot win the debate, you make people despair and check out. That's the game, right? That is the merchants of doubt game. But here we are. 2023 was the hottest year in history since records have been taken. It smashed through records. Here's another piece, just to give you, just so it's all cemented in our brains. All right, so this is also from the New York Times. See how 2023 shattered records to become the hottest year. The numbers are in, and scientists can now confirm, this is back in January, right? Scientists can now confirm what month after month of extraordinary heat worldwide began signaling long ago. Last year was the Earth's warmest by far in a century and a half. Global temperatures started blowing past records mid-year and didn't stop. First, June was the planet's warmest June on record. Then July was the warmest July, and so on, all the way through December. Average across the year, temperatures worldwide were 1.48 degrees Celsius or 2.66 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they were in the second half of the 19th century. The European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service announced this week. That was warmer by a sizable margin than 2016, the previous hottest year. Scientists at NASA found similarly the global average temperature in 2023 was about 1.37 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial levels, while according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, last year was 1.34 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial average. Each organization used slightly different methods to calculate the numbers, but they all agree that it was the warmest by a wide margin. And I can't show you it right now, but the graph that they give, right, is like you see the tendency of kind of like the creeping up of temperatures year by year, right? Each graph has a line, right? And each time the line gets a little bit higher. 2023 went off the map. I mean, it's the only year in the entire chart, right, that's giving the global average that has like significant white space between the previous year and itself, right, in that line. I also mentioned, and think that we have the ocean temperatures, right? You have scientists, like there's all sorts of articles that are coming out this week. They're like, yep, ocean temperatures aren't going down. All our climate models said that, yes, we're going to have this warm kind of uptick, in part because, El Nino and all this other kind of stuff they're saying. But it's like usually in this kind of weather pattern where we're at right now, the temperatures would start to come down. They did not. They kept on going up. And they continued to rise. And the scientists are not sure. They have a bunch of theories about it, but they are not sure why this is happening. I remember saying a while ago, right, say that, and this is just kind of like a notion, right, in my head. Like I'm thinking, like, the weather forecasts, right, just seem to be all over the map the past few years, right? I mean, just kind of like in ways, there's always a joke. Oh, weather person, the weather person says, this is what it's going to be, and it turns out it's wrong, and people get all mad and stuff like that. Right. So that had always happened to a certain degree, but it just seems like it was like on a regular basis. I was watching the forecast change from day to day, right? Go from like, this is going to be it's going to be a sunny day, and then it's going to be a torrential downpour. It's like, it's weird. We think we're going to get some rain. No, we got flooding. We saw it all throughout the Northeast and all this kind of stuff, right? And in my head, I started to wonder, right? I said, okay, does this mean, I wonder if it's a case where it's not like incompetence on the part of meteorologists, but rather meteorologists are all relying upon models which make certain assumptions based upon past data, right? So the models have assumptions about trajectories, right? So they have assumptions about, given the past, what generally happens in this kind of environment. So you feed that all into a computer, and the computer does it kind of faster and faster. So if I see this weather system coming here, there's this kind of pressure systems over here, in a different area, you got wind direction and all that kind of stuff. Historically, that has led to this, right? To this outcome. But I started to think, well, maybe we're at this point where the models, the reality of what's happening in the climate is outpacing what the models can see. Because the models necessarily rely upon data from the past. Right? Now, there's other models, obviously climate models, which are projecting things in the future. But again, they're based upon, the range of measurements and the assumptions they're making there. Are we at this point? And again, we might find out that that while the temperatures are going to keep on going up, we might find that there's a really a few specific causes that led to this kind of aberration. That look, I'm willing to entertain that, but the whole idea is that right now scientists are baffled by it. Even when they said, okay, yeah, we're going to hit this spike and then it's going to come back down, it kept on going up. Ocean temperatures. So we'll see. Similar thing happened this week, like we see with the attack on the electric vehicles, and we find like John Fetterman basically saying, well, we need to kind of think about what consumers want, so, I just might end up kind of voting with the Republicans on this one. There you go. Way to go, John Fetterman, right? Will Bunch had a great tweet today about this and kind of posted an article talking about with this interview with Fetterman saying that, he might come down against these electrical vehicle promotions or these new policies. And Will Bunch say, hey, when are these liberals going to stop making excuses for John Fetterman? Great question, Will. In another story, again, these are these kind of like the stories that kind of tend to fly under the radar. This one's from Huffington Post. Alexander Kaufman writing about this. Kudos to him. This goes into building codes. And I found this both fascinating and depressing. So the natural gas industry, I'm just going to read from his article. The natural gas industry pulled off an 11th hour victory in its campaign to strip climate-friendly rules out of the latest update for the home building guidelines used in the United States. Houses and commercial buildings constructed to this year's standards were supposed to include the circuitry for hooking up electric appliances or car chargers, potentially adding a few $1,000s to a home's asking price, but saving homeowners tens of $1,000s in renovation costs to rewire existing walls and even more on utility bills. As the International Code Council, the private nonprofit that convenes local governments, lobbyists, and industry professionals together every 3 years to update the codes, when they finalized their year's code book last fall, trade associations representing gas utilities and furnace manufacturers filed formal appeals to strip out the pro-electrification measures. On Wednesday night, this International Code Council, the ICC, the board of directors took the unusual step of going against its own experts to side with the fossil fuel companies, scrapping key codes meant to make electric cars, solar panels, induction stoves, and heat pumps more affordable. These are the little things. A positive development that was, yes, it's going to take a while to go forward, but we're basically saying, okay, you're going to build a new home. This is going to be one of your standards. You're going to have it. You're going to meet these codes to make sure that if people put in solar panels, not even to say that they have to have solar panels on them, but if people put in solar panels, you're going to make it easier, right? If people are going to put in an induction stove, that means one, maybe a dedicated wire that goes to the stove, and instead of there being a gas line poking up behind the stove, there's going to be an appropriate electric outlet for that stove, right? Things like that. And we just did this, actually. We just did this. We had a gas stove, right? And it was reaching the end of its life, and we had talked a lot about, well, we should get an induction stove. But we only had a really little standard plug back there. So in order to kind of like do it, we had to actually have a separate line run. And it wasn't cheap. But we wanted to do that, right? We want to do it, kind of, we'll switch over to induction. And by the way, induction rocks. I love it. I wish it was cheaper than it is right now, but the prices are definitely coming down. We got a fairly decent deal on what we got, and it's great. I mean, I can't even tell you, I'm sorry I'm going off on this, but I can't even tell you like what a better experience it is. And instead of having to stand over hot flames, right, breathing in all that kind of like noxious chemicals, which you all find about, instead of that, working in a cool space and cooking just fine. Thank you very much. Anyways. So a bunch of that stuff. And I just could go on. I already led some of the things, but that's, again, these are the kind of things that are going to be important. Other little thing that kind of came out was the about the United States fell out of the top happiest countries of the world for the first time since they started keeping these records, and young people are particularly unhappy. And again, what do you imagine? You have a disconnect between what kind of young people need and the people who are ruling our country, our elected officials. We see all elected officials that are kind of making policy for kind of the next generations are in their 80s or late 70s, as opposed to seeing themselves reflected in terms of the policy. You see increasing debt, you see declining job opportunities, right? And a whole range of other things, right? You see the kind of the toxic politics of our country, at the national level, making their way down to what happens in the school classrooms. Lots of stuff, right? The one thing I want to point out, like I wanted to, I didn't mean to go on as much as I did just about all that stuff, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about before, just so I'll use this for the rest of the show, then make an announcement, and we'll go. So there was this, thanks to Amy Connect, by the way, of kind of sending me this article first when it first appeared. There's an article that was in the Washington Post. It's called "She Wanted to Take Back America to Biblical Truth, and Then She Won a School Board Seat." Right, the education of a true believer. Linda Wendhold absorbed Patriot Academy's message that America is falling apart as it drifts to its biblical roots, and then she won a seat on the local Pennsylvania school board. That is the Palisades School District. The story here, now again, I have mixed feelings about this story. Let me tell you why. So, on the one hand, I find it a useful narrative for understanding or seeing an example of the right-wing Christian nationalist infrastructure at work. Right? Because she basically, these are all, she's an evangelical Christian, and she started taking classes in by the Patriot Academy, right? And I'm just going to read, this is the description of this in the Washington Post, a Texas-based nonprofit whose mission is to, quote, restore our constitutional republic, unquote, and the, quote, biblical principles that cause the United States to thrive, right? So these courses were started happening at the church, and she takes the classes and is like, can't believe all the things that she didn't know. She reads the Declaration of Independence for the first time, reads the Constitution for the first time, but all of it is filtered through and interpreted through this Christian nationalist lens of the Patriot Academy. She's already in an evangelical, conservative evangelical Christian church. So other people are they're in the feedback loop. They're all watching Fox News, right? So that's the feedback loop. And then she's like, just keeps on taking the classes, and then now becomes a teacher, teaching other people about how the kind of like, what do they call them? The secular leftists and Marxists are attempting to get away from America's true history as a Christian nation, right? And then she goes and wins and eventually kind of says, like, look, she's convinced that, like, okay, yeah, she's learning more and stuff, like she's not doing enough. So what does she need to do? She needs to do more. She's encouraged to do more. The Patriot Academy basically says we need to take our country back. What they mean by back is turning into a Christian nationalist nation. And so she decides to run for school board, and she wins in Palisades School District. I want to give you a little bit of an idea about this Patriot Academy if you haven't read this piece yet. So I'll read a section on here. So the Patriot Academy videos convinced Wendhold that she hadn't been doing nearly enough. As her interest grew, demand for Patriot Academy books and videos was surging. Some of the increase in 2021 and 22 was driven by Americans' anger over the government response to the coronavirus pandemic. Quote, everybody was asking all of a sudden, can the government do this to us? Said Rick Green, who founded the nonprofit after serving 2 terms as a Republican in the Texas House of Representatives. Can they shut down our church? Can they shut down our business? In the years since the pandemic began, the Patriot Academy's annual revenue has grown sixfold to more than $4.5 million per year, according to Green in the group's financial statements. He said about 1 million people across the country have taken a version of his course. Green also speaks about 100 events per year, including one in Colorado Springs in February, where he appeared alongside Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, who has pushed baseless election-related conspiracy theories. Right? To make this case, Green relies heavily on the work of David Barton, an amateur historian and influential figure inside today's GOP. Barton offers a largely deracialized history of American slavery, maintaining that it wasn't rooted in white supremacy. He supports his thesis by asserting that some free black people and Native Americans enslaved people during the colonial times too. He also argues that some black patriots held positions of influence in early America. His narrative doesn't account for the fact that the vast majority of the 500,000 enslaved people at the time of the American Revolution were black, nor does it acknowledge that the country's slave market was created and sustained by whites who, quote, bought their independence with African slave labor, unquote, in the words of Edmund S. Morgan, a renowned professor of colonial American history at Yale University. Morgan called this the, quote, American paradox of slavery and freedom, the rights of Englishmen supported on the wrongs of Africans. Barton has also drawn harsh criticism for claiming that the Founding Fathers intended to create a Christian nation, a view he summed up in a book that was pulled from circulation in 2012 after its publisher, Thomas Nelson, said there were, quote, historical details, matters of fact, not matters of opinion, that were not supported at all. And it goes on to talk about how Barton has been largely discredited in the field of history. Then it goes on to talk a little bit about how she was elected to office. Then she was talk about what she wants to do in the school board, and her attacks on DEI and a whole bunch of other stuff. Right? When there were awards that were given out to acknowledge the successes of the Palisades and getting kind of, say, women in STEM, for example, she's like, oh man, doesn't that discriminate against boys? Right? Things like this. So let me see, there's another piece I wanted here. I could go into more, but I'm not. So it tells this story, right? And then about the impact. And I do think there's value there, right? I do think there's value in people who are unaccustomed to or ask that question, like, how could this happen? See how this happens. For a person who, you know, was a lifelong Republican, but was not and kind of like an outright activist, and how that kind of moved to get this person kind of elected in this position. That's good. What the story completely lacks, and again, this is something I talked with Amy Connect a bit about. We were back and forth about it, and she was, you know, when she's filling me in on this article that was published and said you should check it out, is that there's not a whole lot of context about what's been happening in Bucks County. Right? The story is told as just a, you know, personal profile without situating it within a broader network and organizing efforts that have been taking place in the region. Right? And so how do you tell a story? How do you say, oh, this happened to Palisades School District without recognizing or including in your reporting what happened at Central Bucks School Board? What happened in Pembridge School Board? What's been happening with the Paul Martino funding network to help bolster these kind of elections? Right? Where's all the money behind those boards of election stuff? Right? I mean, that's important context as well. Right? I mean, this story, like, I mean, I read this story and I'm thinking, like, all throughout, I'm thinking, like, look, this is a great story to tell. And if you take this other context, right, which we've all been living through here in Bucks County and throughout Pennsylvania for that matter, and other school districts across the country, and then you put it in connection with these funding networks, you put it in connection with these ideological attacks, you put it in connection with places like Hillsdale College, like Vermillion Education, you put it in context with Paul Martino. I'm like, it's like it's there for you. And then to bring those stories together. So it's not just a story about one woman's journey to the far right Christian nationalist agenda. It's a story about this person in this whole context. Yes, the Patriot Academy was absolutely essential, but so was all this other stuff. The fact that there was happening in that the quote unquote education in her church was the same thing that was happening in local Republican Republican parties, right? You know, we're talking about Penridge area Republican Party. We're talking about Central Bucks Republican Party. You know, what was happening in here too as well. There's this distribution of a game plan, right? Because at the end of this profile, and I understand, look, I understand that, you know, part of what will happen, a journalist will defend this as like, well, you know, because that's what a profile is, right? You're telling this kind of the story of this person as they see it to this other things like this. I get it, right? I understand that's what a profile is. I understand that's what a profile is, but you got to understand the freaking context. Why is this an important story to tell, if not try to account for what has been happening at the school board level? And if that's why, you know, unless maybe, I don't know, maybe this dude, right? You know, maybe Greg Jaffe, which I don't think it's true. Maybe they're you know, kind of like they're a Christian nationalist themselves, want to tell like a feel good story about someone else who joined the ranks. I don't think that's what's going on here. But part of the role of journalism is to not only report what happened, not only report the facts, but to help people understand the context so they can make informed decisions of those based upon those facts. You see what I'm saying? So Palisades School District is now on, I mean, it had, you know, we've been talking about Palisades too as well quite extensively, but, you know, what was happening in Palisades was not as heated as what would happen in Penridge and what happened in Central Bucks. That seems like it's on its way to change. So we're going to be talking more about what's going on in Palisades. And this is the other thing, you know, like up in the Palisades School District, you know, I would encourage, and I know, look, I know there's people already organizing up there and things like this. So I'm, who the hell am I, right? But I think that one of the lessons that I took away, I remember talking to Diana Lagerman, right, from Central Bucks, where she was running for school district, and Paul Martino basically put out a character assassination hit on her, right? All over social media, personal threats, all this other kind of stuff, right? Or people that he was associated with personal threats, whatever that. You know, Diane Lagerman has told the story. She's written about it, right? Do check her stuff out. We had her on the program back then. And one of the things we talked about, right, was that experience for running for office. And one of the things that happened, which she and others who were running for office that year encountered, was that these kind of like, you know, Democratic Party consultants came in to kind of support their candidacy. But that was happening at the same time that there was a rise of this anti-DEI stuff, you know, the whole claims that, you know, you're kind of trying to make white kids feel bad, you know, I mean, all kind of the nonsense that we had to deal with, the attacks on LGBTQ youth. I mean, all that kind of stuff, which was, you know, I shouldn't say continues to happen, right? Kind of all throughout the area. And the Democratic Party consultants had come in and basically were telling candidates, I'm not sure how much like Diana Lagerman said this on the show, or if this is also reflective of some of the other conversations I've had with other candidates in the area, but and said to ignore that stuff, right? Said to basically, you don't want to kind of engage that, focus on your message here, because if you don't want to give them oxygen, right? That's always their language. You don't want to give them oxygen, you don't give them attention. Hopefully we're past that now. Right. And I mean, I have some hope that this article in the Washington Post might provide an interesting conversation starter for people in the community, but then also during those board meetings. My understanding at the last board meeting that just happened, I guess, earlier this week, that while several people knew about this article, and there only one person spoke up about it. Right. I can't tell you how much here in Penridge, how important it was to hear person after person after person after person to go to speak to certain things. And yes, I get it. The school board that we had before we, the Penridge Community Alliance folks before they won the election and kind of, changed the direction of the school board. People knew when they were going up there and they were commenting on things that, it's not going to change the mind of these right-wing Moms for Liberty nut jobs that were up there, right? But what it did do is it helped bolster and create the community that was necessary to defeating those extremists. The public speaking part of it is as much for people who are in the audience as it is for that board. In an ideal world, yeah, we'd be able to make rational arguments and maybe convince them and change their mind. But this is not the world we're in for these people. People like this. Linda Wenholt. So do check it out. There'll be a link in kind of show notes to that article, but something else to be thinking about. I do want to end the today's show on a little bit of a high note, as it were. The Bucks County Beacon is hosting the first ever Beacon Fest, they're calling it. I love it, right? It's Beacon Fest. It is going to be held on June 1st, 2024. Is it going to be at the Snipes Farm that is in Morrisville, PA? That's kind of down towards Levittown. So I know those folks of us up here in Upper Bucks are going to be like, oh man, an hour drive. But it looks like it's going to be a great one. Look, it's going to be a benefit concert. It's going to support the work of the Bucks County Beacon. It's going to feature Emily Drinker, Sug Daniels, John Beecher, Allright Jr., and Baron Tiger. There's going to be food, there's going to be drink vendors, there's going to be sponsor booths, there's going to be nonprofit booths, and it'll be a good time, and it will help raise funds, right? The whole idea is to be a fundraiser to support the work of the Bucks County Beacon. I mean, I know that, people, if I'm talking to you and you're in this community, you're in the Bucks County region, or even in Pennsylvania for that matter, you know how valuable the work of the Beacon has become. I mean, the Bucks County Beacon is the go-to place for community building around independent media in here. I mean, I appreciate folks that are listening to my podcast and all this other kind of stuff. But we do not have the kind of funding and the background and the network of writers and support that the Beacon has. And that's why I work with the Beacon too as well. That's why I help produce their podcast. That's why I believe we need to support that institution. And the fact that we're going to have a Beacon Fest that's going to be a fun time, that's going to bring all the kind of the troublemakers together for a day of celebration of that project, of the Bucks County Beacon is amazing, right? And shout out to who designed the little flyer. I freaking love it, right? It's got little like the guitar kind of emerging from the kind of the landscape with birds flying around on the top of the guitar. You got a little raised fist. It's fantastic. All right, great logo. I'm so psyched. There better be t-shirts is all I'm going to say as part of the fundraising thing. But do check it out. There's a link to the announcement. I'm from on Twitter. You can get tickets on sale right now. You go to Eventbrite. You head on over to there. Let's see, the doors open at say 3 p.m. on that day, and they go into the evening. Tickets are $45, right? Again, this is going to be a fundraiser. There's a little coupon on there right now for $5 off if you kind of apply it. So you can get it for kind of a little bit less, which is pretty fantastic. It's so worth it, right? To come out and support and celebrate together as part of the community, the work of the Bucks County Beacon and the community that's built up around it. So I hope to be there. I hope to see you there. I'll tell you what one of my biggest concerns is at this point, right, for myself, is I've been to have this weird kind of cycle of sickness. I think I've mentioned this on the show before. I've had this kind of cellulitis that keeps on recurring. And it's been on this kind of 4-month cycle, which I'm hoping we got resolved, but right around when this is when that's the 4-month mark. So I'm doing my best to keep myself healthy. So I will kind of be there for it because that would be really good. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I'm hoping that something that at very least I'll be there in spirit. Let's put it their way. But I hope that as many people get out there as possible and just spend an awesome day with some awesome people. All right. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for me today. I appreciate all your support, appreciate your time. Share this out. Let other folks know that kind of we're back on the track. I'll have some information about upcoming shows. I've got some local folks that have reached out to me, and I'll make the announcement again now too. If you are you're someone who's like working on stuff in the community and you'd be willing to kind of like come on the show, right? You'd be interested in coming on the show, let me know. I would ideally, I'd like to keep, the interview show going on kind of Monday evenings at 7 p.m. Keep that as consistent as possible. But I'm also open to using this Friday show as places to bring voices for the community on too as well. Because I think that the more that we bring folks on that are talking about specific things kind of in the region, I think the better. I much prefer to be talking to people about this stuff. Hearing their perspectives than just talking about what's happening in the media from my perspective. Yes, I can yammer on. I am a kind of a faculty member. I'm a professor, which I do this stuff for a living, right? But I love radio. I love being on here. I love talking with, like, thinking stuff through, thinking about all you, hearing your feedback. All that kind of stuff is awesome. But the more people we can bring on, the better. So if you know folks, right, or you are one of those folks that are interested in, say, coming on the show, talk a little bit about the work that's happening in your community, the struggles that you're kind of facing, the organizations that you're built up with, I'd love to have you on. You can reach out to me just anywhere on social media. You can also hit us up at our email at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com. Look forward to hearing from you. All right, everybody. That's going to do it for me today. Have an awesome weekend if you can. Let me see if my music is even going to work today. Yeah, this is one of these things, right? This is one of these things that I'm not sure why that my technology is giving me such problems of late, but nonetheless, it is. I have some sneaking suspicions that it has some kind of personal vendetta against me per se, but just pretend right now that you hear some music going on that's saying like there's no people in the future, all that kind of stuff, because that's essentially what is supposed to be playing right now, but it is not. So everybody, I wish you a wonderful weekend. I hope you have a good time, that you're kind of gearing up for the 2024 primaries that are coming up, even though they're kind of going to be relatively uneventful, and into the summer as we organize to keep our democracy alive and strong. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We're out of here. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.